The rain hit the glass walls of the 23rd floor with soft but relentless taps, turning the city lights below into blurry rivers of gold and white. From his office, Alejandro Vargas sat silently behind his massive desk, staring down at the streets beneath him. Thousands of people moved through life every day without realizing how quickly everything could disappear. Cars passed. People laughed. Phones rang. Meetings happened. Dreams rose and fell. And yet Alejandro felt absolutely nothing. At 46 years old, Alejandro had everything people spent their entire lives chasing. He owned hotels, construction companies, real estate investments across several cities, luxury properties, and enough money to buy almost anything he wanted. Newspapers called him brilliant. Magazines called him a visionary. Business channels called him ruthless. But loneliness did not care about money. Loneliness didn't care about success. And loneliness had lived with him for years. Inside the company, employees lowered their voices whenever he passed. They respected him, feared him, obeyed him, but no one truly knew him. No one smiled naturally around him. No one spoke honestly. Except one person. Her name was Sofia. Sofia worked as part of the cleaning staff. She had been there for almost 2 years, and unlike everyone else, she never acted nervous around Alejandro. She never treated him like a king or a monster. She simply treated him like a person. Every evening around 7:30, after most employees had gone home, she would quietly clean offices across the floor. Sometimes Alejandro noticed her humming songs while working. At first, he found it strange. Then he found himself waiting for it. One evening she walked into his office carrying cleaning supplies and stopped when she noticed him still sitting there. "You're still here?" she asked. Alejandro looked up from paperwork. He raised an eyebrow. "You sound surprised." Sofia shrugged. "You've been here since morning." "And how would you know that?" "Because I arrived before everyone else today." Alejandro looked at her silently. Most employees avoided looking directly into his eyes. She didn't. "You should go home," she said casually while wiping dust from a shelf. He almost laughed. Nobody talked to him that way. "You're telling me what to do?" "I'm suggesting." He leaned back in his chair. "And if I don't listen?" She smiled. "Then tomorrow you'll be grumpy and everyone here will suffer." Alejandro stared at her for several seconds. Then something unexpected happened. He laughed. Not loudly. Used enough to surprise himself. Sofia stopped cleaning and stared. "Wait, was that a laugh?" Alejandro immediately became serious again. "No. You laughed." "No, I didn't." "You did." He shook his head. But for some reason, the corner of his mouth moved slightly. Sofia smiled and returned to work. Alejandro watched quietly. For the first time that day, the office didn't feel empty. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Without realizing it, Alejandro began staying later. Sometimes Sofia would leave tea on his desk. Sometimes she would tell stories about ridiculous things that happened during the day. Sometimes she talked about her grandmother. Sometimes about life. And sometimes about nothing at all. Alejandro mostly listened. But listening became the part of the day he looked forward to. One night Sofia entered his office and found him staring at old photographs. She froze. Alejandro quickly closed the folder. "Todo late." "I didn't mean to look," she said quietly. Silence filled the room. Then Alejandro spoke. "My wife died 8 years ago." Sofia looked at him carefully. He rarely spoke about personal things. "I never told anyone here." She sat slowly in a nearby chair. "You don't have to say more if you don't want to." Alejandro looked toward the window. "After she died, people changed around me." His voice sounded distant. "Or maybe I changed." Sofia didn't interrupt. "They stopped seeing me as a person. They looked down. They only saw money. The room became quiet. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. Then Sophia said softly, "I don't think money is why people become lonely." Alejandro looked at her. "I think fear does that." He frowned. "What do you mean?" She folded her hands. "People become afraid to say the wrong thing. Afraid to get close. Afraid of rejection." Alejandro stared. "And sometimes," she continued, "the lonely person builds walls so high nobody can enter." Those words hit him harder than he expected. Because deep inside, he knew she was right. For several moments he said nothing. Then Sophia stood up. She smiled gently. "Good night, Mr. Vargas." She walked toward the door. Tim paused. "Oh, and tomorrow try going home before midnight." He looked confused. "Why?" She grinned. "Because even millionaires need sleep." Then she disappeared. Alejandro stared at the empty doorway. And for reasons he didn't understand. He smiled again. But neither of them knew that only a few days later, something would happen that would change everything. Because someone inside the company was hiding secrets. And Alejandro was about to hear words that would leave him completely frozen. If you're enjoying this story and want more emotional twists, shocking revelations, and unforgettable characters, subscribe and continue this journey because the biggest secrets are still ahead. 3 days after that conversation, Alejandro Vargas woke up with a headache that felt like a hammer striking the inside of his skull. He had spent another sleepless night buried under contracts and financial reports, ignoring the exhaustion building inside him for months. The morning meetings were endless, investors demanded answers, phones rang non-stop, and by late afternoon his vision had begun to blur. Still, like always, he ignored it. Because Alejandro Vargas had built his entire life on one dangerous belief. Weak people stop. Strong people continue. At least that was what he had repeated to himself for years. Around 6:30 that evening, most of the employees had already left the office. The floor had become quiet except for keyboards clicking in distant rooms and the sound of rain beginning again outside. Alejandro stood from his desk. Then suddenly, the room spun. His hand grabbed the edge of the table. His chest tightened. His breathing became heavy. For a moment darkness swallowed his vision. He heard a voice. "Mr. Vargas?" "Sophia." The next few seconds felt like a dream. He felt hands holding his shoulders. He heard panic in her voice. "Sir. Sir." He tried answering. But his body felt strangely heavy. Then an idea appeared in his mind. A strange idea. A terrible idea. He didn't know why he thought of it. Maybe curiosity. Maybe loneliness. Maybe years of never knowing who truly cared about him. He closed his eyes completely. And stayed still. Sophia's breathing became faster. "Oh my God." He felt her shaking his shoulder. "Mr. Vargas. Please wake up." Silence. He remained motionless. Then he heard her footsteps running across the office. For several seconds he heard drawers opening and closing. Then her voice again. But now it sounded different. Shaking. Afraid. He heard her pull out her phone. Then she made a call. Alejandro expected her to call emergency services immediately. Instead, he heard. "Grandma." His heart paused. "Grandma?" Her voice trembled. "Grandma, I don't know what to do." Alejandro kept his eyes closed. He collapsed. I think he fainted. Silence. Then Sophia spoke again. And what she said next made Alejandro's heart stop. "I think I love him." Everything inside Alejandro froze. For 1 second he thought he had imagined it. Maybe he misunderstood. Maybe his mind wasn't working correctly. But then Sophia continued. I know it sounds ridiculous. Her voice cracked. I know people would laugh if they heard me. Alejandro remained perfectly still. I know everyone would think I care about his money. A tear escaped her voice. But that's not true. Alejandro felt his chest become tight. No movement. No sound. Only Sofia speaking on the phone. I started caring about him long ago. Silence. He eats alone every day. He works until midnight. He pretends not to care. He acts strong. But sometimes when he thinks nobody is looking. Her voice became soft. He looks like the loneliest person in the world. Alejandro felt something painful inside him. Because nobody had ever described him that way. Nobody. Not his executives. Not his employees. Not his business partners. No one. Only her. Then Sofia cried quietly. I never wanted this. I never wanted feelings. I know someone like him would never look at someone like me. Alejandro felt his throat tighten. He's a millionaire. I'm just. She paused. I'm used, Sofia. Several seconds passed. Then she whispered. But if he opens his eyes right now. Her breathing shook. I swear I won't care about anything else. Alejandro could not stay still anymore. Slowly. Very slowly. He opened his eyes. Sofia turned. For 1 second her face lost all color. The phone slipped from her hand. And hit the floor. Silence. Absolute silence. Her eyes widened. Alejandro stared at her. She stared back. Neither moved. Neither breathed. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. 15. Then Sofia whispered. You were awake? Alejandro looked guilty for the first time in years. He suddenly realized how insane this looked. Her expression changed from shock. To embarrassment. To horror. Then anger. You were pretending? Alejandro sat up slowly. Sofia. You were pretending? He stood quickly. No, listen. You let me panic. I didn't mean. You let me think something happened to you. Alejandro had negotiated billion-dollar deals. He had faced ruthless competitors. He had controlled rooms full of powerful people. But right now. He had absolutely no idea what to say. Sofia looked ready to cry. And somehow that felt worse than anything. She turned and started walking toward the door. Alejandro moved quickly. Sofia, wait. She stopped. Without looking back. His voice lowered. I'm sorry. Silence. I haven't trusted people for a long time. She still didn't move. He looked down. I think. The words felt strange leaving his mouth. I think I wanted to know if anyone actually cared. Sofia slowly turned around. Her eyes were wet. Alejandro looked directly at her. And then I heard something I wasn't supposed to hear. Her face immediately turned red. Oh no. She covered her face. Oh no 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 no. Alejandro almost smiled. She looked absolutely horrified. Please forget everything. Sofia. Forget all of it. I can't. She stared. Alejandro took a step closer. Because for once in his life. Money meant nothing. Status meant nothing. Fear meant nothing. I can't forget it, he said softly. Because nobody has ever said something like that about me. Sofia slowly lowered her hands. Alejandro looked directly into her eyes. And because. He smiled slightly. I think I was waiting for you to say it. She blinked. What? Alejandro laughed quietly. A real laugh. Not forced. Not controlled. I started staying late because of you. Hera's widened. I started drinking tea because of you. Another step. And every day I waited for 7:30. Sofia stared silently. Rain continued hitting the windows behind them. Then she whispered. You did? Alejandro nodded. Yes. Tears filled her eyes. But this time they weren't tears of sadness. Slowly. Very slowly. She smiled. Months later people inside the company began noticing changes. Alejandro smiled more. He went home earlier. He laughed sometimes. Employees looked confused every time it happened. And every evening around 7:30. People would see the most powerful man in the company walking toward the cleaning department with 2 cups of tea. One for himself. And one for Sofia. Because sometimes life changes not because of money. Not because of power. Not because of success. But because one person finally sees the heart hidden behind the walls.